Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. I woke up this morning, Briahna, not sure what day it actually was, and for a brief 10 seconds I thought maybe it was Friday. But no, it's Tuesday. Good news, we have a whole week of content still to produce. Are you
nice pivot,
as
Robby.
delighted as I am?
Nice pivot. I appreciate the turn there.
All right, well, we do have a very interesting story to get to. One, we know you have a lot of interest, the viewers, as do we, the hosts. Why don't you take it away?
That's right, Robby. All eyes will be on Special Counsel Robert Hur's testimony on the Hill today. His testimony, released in advance of the proceedings, indicates that he will tell Congress, quote, "I knew that for my decision to be credible, I could not simply announce that I recommended no criminal charges and leave it at that." Hur set off a firestorm earlier this year when he released a report pertaining to classified documents found at Biden's home. He concluded that a jury wouldn't be likely to convict Biden because he'd be seen as, quote, "a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory." MAGA supporters claim there has been a double standard when it comes to prosecutions.
So I've been reading the Times, MSNBC, et cetera, mainstream reporting that has now looked at the actual transcript of the interview between Biden and Hur. And what I am seeing, I think, in the media is an attempt to soften Hur's assertions by saying, if you look closely at this transcript, maybe it's not as bad, well-meaning, elderly, forgetful man. It's not as bad as that. They point to a couple times where Biden's saying that he's a senator rather than a vice president, but he did actually correct it pretty quickly. That's all fine. However, the kerfuffle kind of around the exact year of Beau Biden's death and whether that fed into his decision to run and which cycle that was when the memoir came out, that does look like he did fail to recollect that this was he declined to run against Hillary in 2016, and then because he was going through his son's death at the time, and he did confuse the years on that pretty egregiously.
Yeah. So. He repeated. I mean, it's odd because it's been framed as him forgetting when his son died, and it almost feels more that he's forgetting whether he's talking about the 2016 cycle,
right, exactly,
or not quite the 2020 cycle, but his decision to run in 2020 leading up to 2020, which would have been around 2017, which is when the events relating to the document case really happened, because that's when he was leaving the White House. So that's what keeps coming up, where he is talking about trying to create some context for why he might not have remembered details around the provenance of the documents as he was leaving the White House, but rooting that lack of recollection or whatever was going on at the time in the 2015-2016 era when his son was dying and ultimately passed away. What do you take away from that? I was inclined to believe, prior to seeing this transcript, that the nature of depositions is that, people giving testimony are advised to say you do not recall rather than be caught in a lie.
Right. That doesn't mean you're having cognitive problems. That means
right.
you're paying attention to your lawyers.
And I anticipated that it was possible that when we saw the transcript, a lot of I do not recall might be unfairly characterized as him having a poor memory. This is something different. And it wasn't just a one-off. He seemed to be repeatedly confusing the different time periods during which various things took place, asking repeatedly, when did I leave the office again? When did I leave the office again? And for, again, a normal person, I don't think this would raise a lot of alarm bells. But it doesn't, I think, create good optics for someone who is expecting to be in office for another 4 years, who has been avoiding media engagement because it seems almost every time he encounters the media, there's some gaffe. Gaffe seems to be too soft a word to explain or to characterize some of the things that have been happening. And I don't know that this transcript is as exculpatory for Biden as Democrats might hope.
He's not applying to be a manager at a Starbucks. He's running to have the most powerful job in the world, one that demands not just it should demand extraordinary sharpness of intellect, an ability to really respond to crises in real time and to communicate effectively on the fly to the American people, to receive questions, hostile questions from reporters, be able to characterize them and respond. And yes, well, I don't think the transcript, it doesn't make me go, oh my God, it doesn't make my jaw drop open at how poor, that he's senile and confused and doesn't know where he is.
Right.
What it shows is a totally understandable for his age slowness to find the right words and the right time. That is not unusual, is not extraordinary, but I'm sorry to say, could very well be something people judge makes you not the best candidate for the job of presidency at your advanced age.
And I will say the not forgetfulness, but the lack of knowledge, the I don't knows around his testimony about the placement of the boxes, who picked up the boxes, who packed them, how did it get into the garage, I find to be a lot less worrisome. He's a man with a lot of staff and a big team. I don't expect him to know some of that, so I wouldn't characterize that as any kind of reflective of any kind of cognitive problem. And then toward the end of the Times article, they give examples where Biden appears clear-headed, where he pushed back against characterizations made by the attorneys who have gotten things wrong at various instances. I gotta say, my reading of that section of the article felt a little like overcompensation. Same. That's like me saying I'm sitting here and having a conversation with you as evidence of something. I mean, it's just, it felt a little like grasping for straws for me. He said, for example, they say he made jokes over the 2 days, teasing prosecutors. Okay, that doesn't say anything about his cognitive fitness. And at certain points, the Times says he corrected his interrogators when they were the ones who misspoke. When Mr. Hur showed him a photograph and suggested that two documents resembled each other, Mr. Biden objected to the comparison.
Yeah.
I don't think those documents look like each other. I mean, okay, but that's neither here nor there. I do think, people should read it themselves. I do think we have a bit of the transcript that we can pull up on the screen. But
yeah, and I was also going to say, I think this should not. I don't know if Democrats are still going with the strategy to try to indict or cause a suspicion of Robert Hur himself. This looks very fair to me, the way he handled it. And Robert Hur, elsewhere, he did say Biden had, at one point he said Biden has a photographic memory. He had other complimentary things to say about him. So the idea that what he had said about his report about the first news cycle about this was that was like unfair and was meant to sandbag Biden and was going deliberately out of his way to unfairly characterize or malign Biden seems like malarkey.
Well,
to
in fact,
one of the president's favorite words.
In Hur's opening statement, which we read from at the top of this segment, he says, look, there has been a lot of attention paid to the language in the report about the president's memory, so let me say a few words about that. My task was to determine whether the president retained or disclosed national defense information willfully, meaning knowingly, and with the intent to do something the law forbids. I could not make that determination without assessing the president's state of mind. For that reason, I had to consider the president's memory and overall mental state and how a jury likely would perceive his memory and mental state in a criminal trial. And he goes on elsewhere in this to say that it's not normally asked of prosecutors to make these kind of public statements, and with reason. But given the nature of this, he felt like he had to substantiate why it was that he was basically letting Biden off the hook and not bringing criminal charges, knowing again how political this context is.
Right, and how Republicans would react to that.
Yeah.
So, it seems very fair. Obviously, so we know what his statement is going to be at these proceedings, but then he's going to take questions. So I'm sure we'll have more to react to tomorrow. After we hear from the
man himself,
Congress talking to the man himself. Yeah. All right, we'll be back with more Rising right after this. Stay tuned.